Hello, everyone. This is Rajiv. I'm Dr. Rajiv Sharma, Public Health Specialist and Lead Emergency Management, Division of Global Health Protection, US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, India Country Office. Namaste. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are, distinguished speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends. Currently, I'm speaking from India, and India is celebrating Holi festival today and tomorrow. Holi festival is a festival of colors, multiple colors, beautiful colors. So greetings from personally from my side to all the participants and distinguished speakers. Welcome you all to the webinar on evidence resources for pandemic response and evidence and gap map. I would like to introduce today's first speaker, followed by the second speaker, and both the speakers will have a designated time. And the first 15 minutes is for the introduction, and then we'll have the second half is our presentation. And we have kept enough time for question and answer so that all the participants and our online learning community, can ask questions. So let's make this webinar a two-way process or a two-way communication system so that you are engaged with our distinguished speakers. And the first speaker is Dr. Bhumika TV. She has over 10 years of experience in the area of evidence synthesis. She is currently working as the Director General of Campbell, South Asia since January 2022. She has received training in the area of evidence synthesis by Cochrane, Campbell, Epicenter, and World Health Organization. During her tenure, she has worked on more than 30 systematic review projects and has more than 35 peer-reviewed publications. Her core area of research is on evidence synthesis, systematic reviews, rapid reviews, scoping reviews, and evidence and gap maps, and working towards public health issues of low and middle income countries. Welcome you, Dr. Bhumika TV. And our second speaker is Dr. Ouma Ojiambo. He has over 3 years of experience in evidence synthesis and a strong interest in the field of infectious diseases research. He holds a master's degree in clinical epidemiology and biostatistics from Macquarie University in Uganda, a postgraduate diploma in project planning and management from the Uganda Management Institute, and a bachelor degree in cytotechnology from Macquarie University in Uganda. He currently works as a consultant at Campbell, South Asia, and is involved in more than 3 projects at CSA. In today's webinar, our experts will imparting knowledge on the evidence-based multidisciplinary approach to learning from experience of previous pandemics and enhance our preparedness and response capacity for impending outbreaks. Dear friend, it may also help relevant stakeholder researchers and implementing partners to understand the common requirements for future effective preparedness and response. You all know a pandemic is a widespread outbreak of infectious disease that has the potential to significantly increase morbidity, mortality across a vast geographic area as well as cause serious economic, social, political disruption. There is evidence that over the past century, increased global trade and interconnectedness, urbanization, changes in the land use, increased exploitation of the natural environment have all raised the likelihood of pandemics. We all live in a global village. The COVID-19 pandemic is frequently referred to as a black swan event, which is an occurrence with unprecedented consequences that is difficult to forecast and even more difficult to calculate the probabilities of. The pandemic affected several nations with variability severity for most. Government responding to the pandemic has been an extraordinary challenge. The pandemic has highlighted structural and societal problems, including the decline in public health confidence in the authority and professional guidance exacerbated by a surge of misinformation. In this situation, assessment offer vital resources to promote the sharing of lessons about what is working, what is not working. We always refer to what work well, what did not work well. So that could work for whom in real time. What efforts did government make to target specific or difficult to reach demographics, and how well did the public receive the information? So this is very interesting area and very interesting subject for our fraternity and our participant, which is aligned with the pandemic management. Now I pass on the floor to Dr. Bhumika TV. Over to you, Dr. Bhumika. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Sharma, for the introduction. So I thank Campbell Collaboration for giving me this opportunity to present this interesting work on evidence resources for pandemic response. It's an evidence map. I'm going to share my screen. This is one of the interesting and innovative projects that we've been working on. So the title of this project is Evidence Resources for Pandemic Response and Evidence and Map. So we're working under the guidance of Dr. Howard White, and Kevin and Sujata are my other team members. And also we have Frida and Maria from Swedish Research Council. So they're constantly supporting us throughout the process of this project. And this project is funded by Swedish Research Council. So first we'll learn about the background of this project and what's an AGM, aim and scope, followed by objectives and the pilot work that we did, and conceptual framework, classification of evidence resources, and the procedure of search, screening, and coding results and uses of this map, and the conclusion. Also, what's an evidence and gap map? So this is it's a visual framework where we map the existing evidence in an existing area. And it's also the collection, it's an evidence collections that provide a visual presentation on the availability of evidence for a particular sector. So it also helps to consolidate what we know and what we do not know about studies that evaluate the effectiveness of interventions in a given area, and also by mapping out existing and ongoing systematic reviews and impact evaluations in this field, and by giving us a visual representation, the graphical display of areas, whether it is strong, weak, or non-existent evidence on the effect of such interventions. So what happened when COVID-19 struck? So we all were looking for enough information to act, and we're looking for reliable resources. And was there any evidence-based information for the development of guidelines? And did we have any platform to look at evidence from previous pandemics? We're always struggling with this. So whenever the pandemic first strikes, so there's always a need for quick evidence, for preparedness, or to design interventions, or to act on various sectors. So we have to implement certain things, so we need to act immediately. So we need such platforms of evidence as available. So we all were looking for it. At the same time, what happened was, so during this COVID-19 pandemic, it resulted in growth of evidence resources. And often there was repetition or duplication of research that was going on. So as a fact, there were a lot of research that was duplicated. And so it's hard to find out what research has been carried out and in what area. So hence we decided that we would produce a map of what resources are available on the various pandemics, and those interested in developing evidence resource may find an existing resources which may meet their needs, so they can use that. And at the same time, they can review existing resources that determine what sort of resource they would want, or they could also mine or extract existing resources for content for their own resource. So with this aim, we thought we would do a scoping exercise and map all the available evidence resources related to COVID-19. At the same time, in discussion with the funding organization, we listed out some of the important pandemics that we decided that we'll include in the map. And we also identified different themes or sectors where we could align those pandemics under those themes. And this map could be produce user-friendly evidence products that can be produced. And is the scope of this AGM. So we categorized this evidence map or evidence resources under evidence collections, evidence platforms, databases, evidence maps, and decision-making tools like the guidance and toolkit relevant to pandemics. So coming to the objective, initially we thought we'll develop a framework for the mapping of the pandemic evidence resources and also we need to assess the confidence what we have in the resource and to identify the relevant evidence resources for a priority set of pandemic which we had decided, and also to provide a summary overview of the evidence resources in the map and identify priority areas for future research. And we defined the evidence collection as the information or collection of studies or evidence resources provided by an organization, and that we called it as evidence collection. At the same time, some of the organizations also summarized the reviews from other organizations that we categorized under evidence collection. An evidence platform is basically, it's an online resource which contains links to relevant evidence resources. It could be blogs of primary studies or other research materials. And database, it's a searchable set of studies that goes under a database under a category of any of the pandemics. An evidence map presents the evidence. Usually it's like a pictorial framework, like I already mentioned, and evidence products like guidelines or recommended policy and evidence-based products. So we had this inclusion and exclusion criteria. So we included evidence resources that were online and also which provided link to primary studies or reviews of studies or guidance documents. And we also included the resources that are open and it's readily available for us to access, and excluded if it is not fitting into our pandemic that we had pre-decided, and also if that resource had blogs or webinars which did not have any scientific base as information, and also if it is the resource for on the pandemic or virus, it's inadequate. And first we decided to do a pilot work and see how it goes. And first we conducted a search. Initially we thought we would do it for COVID-19 as that pandemic was recently. There's a lot of research conducted in that area. So we conducted a search on Google, and then we identified various organizations and websites linked to that particular for COVID-19. So we conducted a search, and then we adopted snowballing technique, and we applied the inclusion and exclusion criteria and coded based on set of the themes that we initially discussed. And then we reassess the themes during the pilot stage. And then at the same time, we also realized that there should be a tool or the way how we critically appraise those evidence resources that are going into our map. So since we did not find a relevant existing critical appraisal tool to appraise the evidence resource, the team decided to develop one of the critical appraisal tool to appraise these evidence resources that we include. So there's the overall steps that that was involved in our pilot process. So initially we identified 300 resources on COVID-19. Then we started entering on Excel. Then we moved to we entered the data in EpiReviewer and we double coded. Then we checked for the discrepancies and we tried to do a map. And then we identified more themes and we modified the sections. And we reworked on the themes in discussion with our funders. And also we generated an evidence map, the temporary one. And then we extended our pilot search to HIV evidence resource again. And then we saw how it's going to work. And with this pilot study and in discussion with the funders, we decided that we are going to categorize all the pandemics under these themes, that is on transmission, prevention, and management, and which involve prevention and management aspects and non-pharmacological interventions that could be. And under virology, we thought about information on variants, virulence of pathogenesis and transmission channels. And again, impact and burden of disease was again very important. Then we also looked at, we thought behavioral response, policy response, and pre-existing social organizations, or health systems and evidence system, and gender and equity focused are again very important for us to include as themes. So this is the conceptual framework. So initially we identified evidence resources, and then we categorize under various under various categories as I defined earlier. And then we had certain themes under which this resources would fit. And then we had one place where all of this information on the related pandemic viruses were aligned with the respective themes, and which could also help us to identify some research and knowledge gaps, and which would stimulate for us to conduct other primary resources systematic reviews in that particular area. So for search on COVID, so initially we thought we would start with COVID end because yeah, the primary source was Google, because we had to identify the related websites for our primary information source. And for COVID-19, we started with COVID end because that was one of the major evidence resource that had a lot of information. Through this, we got links to various other websites or evidence resources. And then we later compiled the list of organizations of all the viruses and the pandemics that we decided, and then through the Google, and then we adopted snowballing technique to identify or link those evidence resources to various related evidence resources through the primary source. And similarly, it was carried out for all the pandemics that we had decided. And yes, and overall the data was managed in Excel sheet, and we used Epidemic software. And as I already mentioned, we had pre-specified inclusion exclusion criteria, which we adopted to screen and code based on our pre-identified themes and sub-themes. And then Kevin will take you all through the critical appraisal tool that we've developed and how we rated the quality of evidence resources that we included in this map. So coming to the summary of results, the total we had 802 evidence resources that we identified. Out of that, after screening, we downsized to 496 resources, and the majority of the evidence resources were in the form of evidence platforms. That's the online resources that linked us to various primary studies and the reviews or the toolkits or guidance. That's evidence platform. So the main focus was on transmission, prevention, and management, followed by the burden of disease, and also there was a good number of studies on the virulence, but limited like evidence resources on health system or behavioral response. So this is the Prisma where we identified 802. Out of that, we downsized to 496 study evidence resources. And coming to the type of evidence, pandemic evidence resources. So these are the right side. What you can see is the virus or pandemic that we decided that we would include in this map. That is, along with COVID-19, we have Zika, swine flu, SARS, Nipah, MERS, Hong Kong, influenza, HIV, polio, Ebola, Marburg, CCHF, and COVID-19 specific, and chikungunya, and hemorrhagic fevers, and avian influenza. So here we again had COVID-19 specific and COVID-19 relevant. So there were some evidence resources which were very specific to COVID-19 that we categorized it separately. And some of them were relevant to COVID-19, but they also had other information, so that we categorized them as COVID-19 relevant. So types of themes. So as I mentioned, so majority of the studies that are evidence resources, not studies, I'm sorry. So evidence resources focused on transmission, prevention, and management, followed by impact and burden of disease, then coming to virology. And then relatively, also there was information on policy responses. So if you look at evidence system or systematic reviews of gender and equity focused, or health systems or behavioral responses, there were relatively less number of evidence resources. And again, as I mentioned, evidence platform. was a kind of evidence resource category that is most commonly found. And by type of evidence resources, we also have this theme where we had less number of evidence mapped, but we also had a good number of decision-making products under each of these themes for various pandemics. And we had just evidence collection and platform categorized for each virus on each pandemic under each of the themes. So this is what is the map that we came up with. So we have different pandemic or virus, and then we have themes, as I mentioned earlier, and these bubbles of various colors. So blue is evidence platform. Then if you can see the explanation, so the purple is database, decision making products, evidence collection and evidence platform, and this is what we came up with. And then here we have the details of evidence platform, decision making products, and database or evidence map. And if we click on that, we get the records, and then we could go to each of the colors and find out what exactly, whether it is decision making products or evidence collection, evidence platform, or database, or an evidence map. So coming to the uses of this map, the primary intended use of this map to determine what resources are available. It is not what evidence is available. So what resources are available, which may be synthesized. For example, for pandemic preparedness guidelines, that could be prepared by synthesizing existing guidelines. And then whenever we have to prepare for pandemic, when we have to tackle various challenges for future pandemics, so there is information, there's a platform where the ready information is available, which could be useful. And also to strengthen the public health infrastructure and to coordinate the response focused on situational awareness, or it could help in the transmission reduction and management because information already readily available which we could use. And we could also learn from various pandemics because of the various research on various pandemics that we could track on this map, and also some of the economic consequences of pandemics. This map would be helpful in dealing with that. And most important thing is not to duplicate the research, to identify the research gaps that could be helpful, and to understand what evidence exists in terms of prevention, control, and management, and what is the relevant information on various aspects. So with this, I conclude. This map depicts the most evidence resource available on pandemics. That's COVID-19. So most of this evidence resources focused on COVID-19. And so this map also helps us in preparedness or to tackle various social and economic issues to address or to be prepared for future pandemics. And also we have decision-making products that could be readily available or to amend the existing guidelines or to produce new guidelines. We acknowledge Swedish Research Council for funding this work and providing periodic inputs during the course of this work. Thank you very much. Now I would request Kevin to talk about the critical appraisal tool that we developed, and I also discuss about the quality of the evidence resources that we've included in our map. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhumika. Before Kevin speaks, I would request all the participants, our learning committee members, please record your question in the chat box. And at the end of both the presentation, you will go back to both the speakers for raising your questions. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you so much. So I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you clear and loud.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'll be presenting about the development of a critical appraisal tool for evidence resources. As Dr. Bhumika mentioned in her presentation, We did not have a tool to appraise the evidence resources, so we thought that we could come up with a tool that could help us assess the quality of the evidence resources, kind of trying to segregate what is of high quality and what is not of high quality. And therefore, we come up with a tool, and it's still under development, and your comments here will be very valuable in further refinement of this tool. So, just as has been mentioned, pandemics can result in significant increase in mortality and morbidity, and in response to pandemic, a large number of information is always generated and demanded. And now that we have internet and electronic media, there is easy access to information. And some of the information is very pervasive, and some of it contains conspiracy theories. And it's very hard for the people, the users, the consumers of this information to differentiate what information is good, what information is bad. And therefore, it's very important that they have something that can help them to distinguish between these two. So our aim was to develop a tool that can be used to evaluate the quality of evidence resources. So about the tool, this is a domain-based tool. Basically, the responses are yes or no to the criteria questions under each domain. It is less subjective in the sense that the item is either there or not. So you answer yes or no to the question. There is no gray area, and does not require the overall score to make the final judgment on the particular evidence resource. So we have the domains. We have 4 domains, 5 domains: ease of use, clarity of purpose, achievement of purpose, updating with new information, source of the available content. Those are our domains that we use to assess the quality of a particular evidence resource. But among these, we have what we call critical domains. And among them, we have ease of use, clarity of purpose, achievement of purpose, and updating with new information. We thought to ourselves that this would be the most important things that ought to be there or ought to have been taken care of before an evidence resource is put online, such that we use this to assess the overall quality. So like I said, this tool does not have an overall score. You don't have to sum to come up with an overall score. So these critical domains are used as the determining points of the final score, such that in case any evidence resource has its score as low on any of these critical domains, then it will be rated as low. If it scores medium on any of these, when all other scores are high, it will be rated as medium. And if it scores all through on the critical domains, high, then we shall rate that as high, a high quality evidence resource. So under ease of use, basically what do we look for? So we grouped this because we felt that these evidence resources are not the same in nature, and they may not be assessed the same way, basically in terms of ease of use. So for collections, databases, maps, and platforms, the questions that we ask ourselves are, does the evidence resource have filters for easy navigation? Does it have free access to resources and information, or the information is restricted? Is there a systematic representation of the themes and links and the navigation keys of the database or a collection? And for toolkits and guidance, these are like evidence products or decision-making products. So basically asking, does it have free access to resources or information? Can you download it if you want to use it, or reprint or reproduce it or distribute it with your team? Is there a systematic representation of themes and links on this, referring to different aspects that is the resource is dealing with? And the judgment that we allocated to this is that for collection and databases, we shall rate high if it meets all the 3 criteria, medium if at least one or two criteria above has been met, and if it falls on the criteria above, then we rate that as low. For toolkits and guidance, we apply the same rating process. If it meets the above criteria, we rate that as high. If it meets at least one, we rate that as medium. And if it does not meet, you rate that as low. For clarity of purpose, the question that we asked ourselves to see whether the evidence resource has a clear description of purpose is, does the evidence resource have a clear description of the purpose? The people who are trying to make this evidence resource from the onset, have they really explained what they are trying to do? Because I'm a consumer out here and I need to know, what is this? What is it going, which kind of information is it going to give me? And what am I expected to find here? Some sort of guidance describing the goals and aims of a particular evidence resource. If it's a map, what it is about, what is it trying to map, and all that kind. If it's a guideline or a toolkit, is it for treatment management? Is it for non-pharmacological prevention? So the kind of description. So we could rate high if there is a clear description, medium if the description is there but is not very clear, and low if they do not have a description at all. Achievement of purpose, like I've explained, fine, you've put up there that you are trying to create a map for evidence resources. But now, do you do that? Do you come up with the map of evidence resources, or now you deviate and do something else? So keeping faith to what you set out to do, we assess that as achievement of purpose. So the question was, are available resources clearly and specifically aligned with the purpose provided in the description? Because it can be misleading if you say, if the resource in the description is talking about non-pharmacological prevention tools or say lines, and in there is treatment, there is so many things. So the use of the information kind of gets lost in the maze of the information because you've deviated from what you set out to do. So we rated high if the available resources are clearly aligned to what they set out to do. Medium if there are no grave deviations. They have clearly outlined what they are going to do, but they have not either achieved it fully or they have mixed in with some other things that are minor. And low if there are major deviations from the intended purpose, or no information, no minimum information on what they're trying to do. Updating with new information. Evidence changes over time. There is always new evidence that is coming up because people are always producing new studies, new randomized controlled trials, new systematic reviews that change the landscape of evidence, which may lead to abandonment of what you've been doing before or improving on what you've been doing. So it's very important that if a resource is there online, it does not contain stale information. It has information that is up to date, so that the consumer of this, because some of these people who use these evidence resources are not from the medical field, or they may not come from the discipline from which the makers of that evidence resource come from. They may not be able to have access to the latest information easily as the people of that particular field. So it's important that the resource is updated regularly so that new information can always be available that is relevant in the context and time. So the question you asked here is, are the resources frequently and regularly being updated? If there is regular and frequent update, we rated that as high. If there is an update but it's not frequent and it's irregular, we rated that as medium. And if they do not update at all, we rated that as low. Source of the available content. So this one is about basically, where did you get the information to make that toolkit? Where did you get that information to create a guidance? Where is it? Is it from a systematic review? Is it from a pragmatic randomized control trial? Is it from observational studies? So that the users know the routes from which that the evidence resource took to to come into formation. So, though this is not one of our critical domains, so does not affect really the quality of, but we saw it as important to also check to see whether the makers of the evidence resource are able to describe or provide information on where they're getting their evidence from. So the question we asked is there a description on how the content of available information on the evidence resource identified or obtained? And if it's clear, we rated that as high. If the description is clear but is not very, is available but not very clear, we rated that as medium. And if it's not, there is no description at all, we rated that as low. So basically, as I mentioned earlier, that this is a domain-based tool that does not have an overall score. So on overall judgment, we look at all the 4 critical domains and we make a judgment. If they are all critical domains A to D are rated as high, then the evidence resource is rated as high. If any of the critical domain is rated as medium, and the rest, let's say the rest of the critical domains are high, if this is the lowest, we could look at the lowest rating on any of the critical domain to form a judgment. So we could, if it's medium, we rate the whole evidence resource as medium. If it's low on any of the critical domains, we rate it as low. So we took some steps to try and validate the tool and also assess for the time taken to use the tool. And we did this by calculating the Cochrane kappa and percentage of percent agreement for each of the critical domains and the oral judgment, and the corresponding agreement and the Cochrane kappa for the critical domains was not so bad, was almost substantial. The domains and the overall judgment. And this tool basically you can take 5 to 17 minutes minimum maximum to appraise an evidence resource. On average is about 7 minutes. So it's an easy tool to use that is not time consuming, and it has a very good agreement rating. Inter-rater rating is very substantial, in that if I rated a particular evidence resource and gave someone else to do the same, we are likely to get similar results. So we applied this tool to the evidence resources in our map, and for clarity of purpose, for clarity of purpose, we found out that most of the evidence resources had a description, at least a description on the purpose. So you can see around 56%. Most of them had at least a description, and most of them fell under medium. Those ones that had no description, there were very few. And on achieving the purpose, that's where things start to go wrong. Though with maps and guidance documents like toolkits and guidelines, it was different, because you could, at least for them, they were of good quality in terms of achievement of purpose. However, things like platforms and databases, collections, they kind of they were falling more so in the medium section in terms of achievement of purpose. And in terms of ease of use, most of the evidence resources were medium in terms of medium quality in terms of ease of use. The evidence resource could maybe somebody has put there a guidance on lesson and pharmacological prevention of COVID-19, but this information can only be accessed online. There's no link to download it or something. So it basically, if I'm not online, then I cannot share. So, and there are a few which were in low, whereby they cannot they were not easy to use at all. They had no links. They are not organized in terms of themes and sections whereby a person can easily find what they want to get. There are no things like filters in terms of gender or resource setting. Updating with new information. So still this medium quality took the most of the evidence resources in terms of updating. Updates are made, but not regularly and frequently. Overall, most of the evidence resources were medium quality. And I think that's not very bad. Because this tool has not been available before. I believe with now the presence of the tool, maybe in future when people have access to this tool, when they are trying to make evidence resources, they will be able maybe to check themselves and see if, am I meeting this criteria, and be able to form what is best for the consumers out there. And basically, your comments will be valuable in improving this tool. As I mentioned earlier, that it is still under development. Since it's first of its kind, we don't have a tool for appraise of evidence resources currently. Your comments will be very, very, very valuable. Thank you very much, and thank you so much for listening to me. Over to you, the moderator.
Thank you, Kevin, for an excellent presentation and talk, followed by Dr. Bhumika. Before I give my comments on both the presentation, I would like to take. We have plenty of questions. I don't know how many questions we'll be able to answer, but I'm just picking few questions so that you can answer. This the first question, and thank you all the participants for your active listening and active participating and also raising the question. The first question has been asked by Sue Keller. This either of the presenter can or expert can answer this. What is the biggest challenge for evidence mapping? What if maximum literature focuses on a particular country or region? Do the results of evidence mapping in such a case apply to other regions to form their response policies?
Is Thank you, Mr. Anil, for that question. So in this, we did not categorize our evidence resources based on the countries or the region. So, however, if that is the case, it can happen that there could be or evidence resources available on evidence resources can't be available on a particular country or the region. So I assume you. So if you have to adopt the information, that there's the methodology for that, where you'll have to look at a lot of contextual factors to adopt the policies to a particular region. Hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bhumika. So I will take another question. This question is from Dr. Raju Thapa, India, to Dr. Bhumika. What is the biggest challenge for evidence mapping? What if maximum literature? Oh, I think this is Dr. Raju Thapa question. Oh, sorry, I just combined two questions. So another question from Dr. Raju Thapa. Thank you for wonderful presentation. Just a simple query. In search, screening and coding slide, you have identified 300 evidence resources in the initial stage. Then at the later stage, you identified a second set of 240 evidence resources. Is there any major difference between the two set of evidence resources?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, there's no difference as such. So it's just a step that I mentioned in that piloting process. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhumika.
I think I have another question. The first one on the search related.
Yes. I'm just taking that question. This was the first question, I think, who has Till time I can ask another question. This is from John Ategana for Kevin. Thank you for that presentation. How did you classify the timeliness, timelines on the frequency of updating the resources, such as yearly? This is for Kevin.
Pardon, I didn't get the question clearly. You're breaking.
Okay, I will just rephrase this question. How did you classify the timelines on the frequency of updating the resources, such as yearly, like annually?
Yes, so basically we looked at is the updating regular. That means, is it happening every month, every year, or there is a specific time point in which it's happening? But is it regular? Because usually when you go on a particular evidence resource, they usually give you those that update. They were providing the time. They were providing the time at which they have last updated these previous updates. So you could know that these updates have been happening either regularly or not regularly. So if they have been happening regularly, then that means we could rate that as high. And if they have not, if the last update was, let's say, in 2020 something, 2019, and a new update has come up, let's say in 2023, then that's not very regular. It's not regular in a way. So we could rate that as medium because the updating is anyway happening, but it's not regular and frequent. If there is no updating at all, that's when you could rate that as low. Thank you. I hope I answered your question.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. So another question from Sue Keller. This is for Kevin. What surprised you the most by quality appraisal process? And if you could do more work, what could it be? Like maybe collaborating with others, also doing this work to build validation. You are muted, Dr.
Sorry.
Kevin.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Actually, that's the process we are taking. So since there was no tool about critical appraisal of evidence resources, what we've done our validation, and the next step we are intending to do is to do what we call face and content validity, whereby we're going to send this, collaborate with other experts, send the tool to other experts to look at it, appraise it, validate it, and send us feedback before you can put it out there. So that's the next process that we are going to undertake on development of this critical appraisal tool. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kevin. I think similar question from Dr. Harjit Kaur to Dr. Kevin. Validation is very crucial in any assessment. Can you explain the Cohen Kappa once again that you mentioned in the reliability section? Cohen Kappa.
So basically, Cohen Kappa is used to determine the inter-rater reliability. So we are trying to find out how the two raters agree on a particular evidence resource. So when you do blind rating of a particular evidence resource, you want to assess the level of agreement, because there is agreement by chance, whereby by chance, anyhow, you'll be able to find some agreement in a pool of evidence resources independently validated by two independent reviewers. So basically what we did is that we assigned similar evidence resources to two different reviewers who independently appraised the review, these are evidence resources, came up with the results, and we used data to calculate what we call inter-rater reliability and get the percent agreement between the two reviewers, taking care of agreement by chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kevin. So I'm coming back to the very first question to Dr. Bhumika. Familiar with this is from Sue Keller, Oleman. Hi, familiar with searches for indexed and gray literature. How do you search for existing evidence maps and platforms?
Yes, thank you for this question. So basically, we could not adopt the classical search methodology that we adopt for search databases. So we considered Google as a primary resource, and through Google, so we used keywords and identify the websites or organizations on that particular pandemic, and we listed down all of this related information for the first 10 pages that we identified through Google, and then uh, we we link that to the particular organization, and through that organization we could identify other relevant evidence resources, and that's called a snowballing technique. So that's what we adopted, and I could also share my screen and show you an Excel sheet also how we adopted this.
Yes, we can see.
Yeah, so this is how we identified the name of the organizations through Google, and through that we uh, connected that to another organization, and then we listed down the various website links for each of the organizations, and that's how we have searched these evidence resources. Hope this is clear.
Yes, I think so. Thank you, Dr. Bhumika. Another question, I think we can take one or two other questions. This is from Alex Bahati. The question is, new evidence emerges regularly, while some evidence may lose its reliability due to changes in program, context, and time. How often should the evidence gap map be updated?
So
I think Dr.
it,
Bhumika can answer this question.
yes, so it could be 6 months or 1 year, so we can periodically update evidence on them.
So let me
I,
explore any.
I just want to add something to that question.
Yes, please, please.
So usually when we make an evidence and gap map, it has, if it's hosted online, like now for Campbell South Asia evidence gap maps, if they are hosted on the website of Campbell South Asia, there is always what we call inviting new studies. Even in the event that you've not yet updated the evidence and gap map, there is always a link for people to submit studies to you who come across that evidence and gap map that you can eventually add into the evidence and gap map. So EpiMapper, which is a software which we use to map these evidences, provides for that. So studies can be added from different various people who have access to the evidence and gap map. And as Dr. Bhumika has explained, we can also periodically update using the conventional methods. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kevin and Dr. Bhumika, for the excellent presentation. Uh, I would like to add that at the end, because we have, I think, 5 minutes left, we are ahead of the time. The global community has made strides in preparing for and lessening pandemics effect. The improved international health regulation 2005 structure enabled a more well-coordinated international response, during 2009 influenza pandemic, and we have seen now in this pandemic. Despite these advancements, the world is still not sufficiently prepared for pandemics. Many nations have struggled to comply with even the most of the basic, IHR requirement, core capacity. Progress toward compliance has been uneven. Numerous outbreaks like Ebola, COVID, monkeypox have revealed weaknesses in a number of areas, including timely detection of disease, accessibility of basic care, the tracing of contact, quarantine, isolation procedure, and preparedness outside the health sector, including global, coordination and response mobilization. The patterns will probably persist and get worse. The need to recognize and contain emerging outbreaks that could become pandemics, and expansion and sustainability of investment in preparedness and health capacity have received significant attention. Therefore, it is vital to understand best practices for pandemic, which will come from through analysis of past lessons. And evidence gap map on the pandemic response will help know what measures were effective in previous pandemic, and when in which respect do we need to invest more for health system resilience. So this topics, completely align with the current priority, not only the country level, but the global priority. And Dr. Bhumika has shared what resources are available and scientifically synthesize through the evidence gap map a future way forward for, pandemic management. Moreover, Kevin has, very elucidated uh, like what is the requirement for validating the research. He has he visualized the tool whether studies have been undertaken in a way that makes their finding reliable as well as valid and unbiased. So development of critical appraisal tool overview is really important, and the way he has uh, presented and shared evidences is great. And I hope all the attendees will have some key messages from this webinar from both the distinguished speakers, and will be implanting those in their life as well as to their colleague, and also disseminate this information to other masses to provide a helping hand in building safety and resiliency against future pandemics. This is all, and thank you all again to our active listeners, online learning community, for attending this webinar. Thank you all.